team. So what happened actually, so Zena was a master sport in rhythmic gymnastics, and it was new. So what happened is it was going to be an Olympic sport in 1984. And so she's like, so they recruited a lot of us that were on the national team in rhythmic were former artistic gymnasts, right? We could all go round off, back handspring, back tuck, da 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 da, and then we just throw up our hoop and just switch it over. So I switched to rhythmic gymnastics, and what happened is it was just that I had this great training. It was a very small sport. They had we had a big club in Detroit. There was a big club in Los Angeles, and we just, I made the national team the first time. And it was really interesting back there because the first coach that chose me for the national team, her name was Maria Bakos, who was from Hungary. And it was a fight, which I didn't know, right? Because it was a group routine. And I just, I worked hard. I trained really hard. I made the national team, and it was very exciting. I was the first Black, and it was great. But, when you're an athlete, that's not what you're thinking about. You're like, I am not doing this. I didn't get into the sport to say, let me be the first Black to do it. I just wanted to do my gymnastics, right? It's like, who thinks of that?
No one.
So, no one thinks of that. I'm just doing my gymnastics. And so I was the first Black, and they have a group routine in gymnastics, right? There's group and individual. And so, but it wasn't an issue until after I'd been in like 2 world championships, and they were choosing the national team.
Wow.
And you go to the Olympic Training Center, and it was great because we all knew each other. I'd been on the team. They bring like 13 or so, 14 athletes together, but you have 2 groups because the team was a 6 then. So we had the A group and the B group, and I was on the A group. We were like doing all the choreography, doing it. But when they decide to announce the national team, they took us all to the room. They're like, this is the team going to the world championships. And they didn't say my name. They called up everybody's name, and everybody was like, well, they just looked at me. They're like, what? Wendy's not on the team? And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was really shocked. So I went up to the coach, who was also Ukrainian, right? Russian. And I said, how come I'm not on the team? She said, oh, Wendy, you just stand out too much. And I was like, wow, what am I going to do with that? What am I? Yeah, I was like, okay. So, it was devastating though, right? It was devastating. I called my parents, called them on the phone, Mom, Dad, I didn't choose for the team. They're like, oh, baby, hey, baby, let me tell you, that's okay. We're going to call USA Gymnastics. Because my parents were not having it. They're like, it's not because you weren't good enough. That's not what the argument was. She basically said, you don't fit the team. You don't look the same as everyone else. No joke. So USA Gymnastics changed it around. They said, we're not going to do this selection procedure, which selection procedures can be very challenging. They said, just go by the ranking from national championships. So I was in the top 6 at nationals, and I was able to go to world championships. And it was just kind of a thing like, rhythmic was very new in the U.S. All of our athletes or coaches were trying to make us look like the top people, which were Russian and Bulgarian. And, I'm never going to look like that. I can sound like them. I can speak it, but I'm not going to look it. But they didn't get it. They didn't get that part of, because when we went to the world championships that year, Cuba, which was the only other team in the world that had Black rhythmic gymnasts, had 5 Black girls and 1 white Cuban, right? It was just the opposite of the U.S. team. Yeah. And they beat us. They're like, look, they did it and they beat us. And so, y'all better change your thing. It was like, but it was a wake up call. They beat us. And so it was kind of being in the beginning parts of the sport, people trying to make their name for themselves, yaka yaka. But when you're an athlete, it affects you differently because it is your life. It's like, yo, I train like this to go to worlds, to be on the international level. So it taught me a big lesson, though, that you really do have to speak up for yourself. And this is relatively new at that time. Athletes didn't have a lot of input, right? You just dealt with the cards. You don't speak, just flip, just do whatever you got to do, but don't talk. So that kind of edged me on to be more of an advocate for athletes.